Please be seated. Well, I am lucky enough to be here for my third Sunday this month, but I do see some faces that I don't recognize from the past, so I'll do a very quick introduction. My name is Bob Furniss. I've been a priest here in the diocese for 34 years. The last 16 years, I've been the chaplain at Lakeview Hospital here in Stillwater and a chaplain with their hospice program. So I've had the opportunity to fill in here at Ascension a number of times, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. Some years ago, I read a book by Adam Grant, a professor at the Wharton School of Business, called Give and Take. I looked it up. It was published in 2013. In it, Grant says that people exhibit one of three styles when interacting with other people. Takers like to get more than they give. They put their own interest ahead of others' needs. They feel that to succeed, they need to be better than others. Givers tend toward the other direction, preferring to give more than they get. Givers are other-focused, paying more attention to what other people need from them. And then there are the matchers, who try for an equal balance of giving and getting. Matchers operate on a principle of fairness. When they help others, they protect themselves by seeking reciprocity. If you're a matcher, you believe in tit for tat, and your relationships are governed by an even exchange of favors. Grant says most of us are matchers, but in the book he points out the benefits of being a giver. This morning we consider the main character in what's known as the parable of the rich fool. I'm more interested in thinking about takers as we think about that little parable. His example of a taker, Grant's example of a taker, is the CEO of Enron, Ken Lay. He offers a comparison between Lay and another successful CEO with similar credentials and similar life story, showing pictures of each of them from their company's annual report. One of them is a giver and the other is a taker, but just looking at the pictures themselves, you can't tell which is which until in Grant's book you turn the next page and you see the size of the pictures in these company annual reports. Ken Lay's picture takes one entire page of the annual report, and the other fellow takes 1/10 of the space on his company's annual report. He notices that the taker CEO's narrative in the annual report has a preponderance of first-person singular nouns like I, me, myself, mine, whereas the other CEO uses first-person plural pronouns like we, us, our, ours, ourself. Grant suggests that by looking at these kinds of clues in Enron's annual report, maybe we could have recognized that it was headed for disaster. Well, I'd like you to hang on to these ideas as we take a closer look at the parable. The passage we heard this morning follows on Jesus telling his followers not to worry if they face persecution for following him. And then seemingly out of the blue, someone asked Jesus to settle a family inheritance dispute. Even though Jesus regularly criticized the Pharisees, he was one of them. Pharisees, as students of the law, were sometimes asked to judge legal disputes. But Jesus doesn't have time for this. He's on his way to Jerusalem and what awaits him there. But it seems to remind him of something else he needs to tell his followers. Life isn't about accumulating possessions. Jesus then illustrates what he's talking about with the parable. I won't retell the parable, but I want you to think a bit about this rich man. Notice that he doesn't appear to be particularly wicked. His wealth isn't ill-gotten. He didn't cheat or steal from anybody to get it. And from what I hear about the life of a farmer, I'm a city slicker, I have to confess, it's a lot of hard work. And so we might assume that he really worked hard to get what he has. And at the same time, we need to factor in that he seems to have land suitable to abundant crops and a bit of luck that farmers hope for in terms of the weather. And it doesn't seem unreasonable to propose building bigger barns. It's not obvious at this point that this man deserves what's about to befall him. But listen again to his self-dialogue in this parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grains and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Did anybody notice the I and my language in this little soliloquy? There's no mention of we or ours, no mention of concern for others. Then he drops dead without even realizing that he's been sick. We as observers from a distance can recognize the symptoms of this silent spiritual killer. We notice that he genuinely seems to believe that all the wealth is his, in his possession, under his control, and that he believes that he alone is responsible for it. He produced it. There's an element of delirium that can come along with this illness, and we see it here as this chap imagines that he can lay up enough wealth and possessions that he can simply relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But how much good does his accumulated wealth and possessions do him on the night that his life is required of him? The problem isn't his wealth or his possessions. There's nothing wrong with wealth in and of itself. The problem has to do with his relationship with wealth. He seems to believe that his wealth will allow him to control his own destiny, but he can't save enough to control his mortality. Death spares no one, rich or poor or anywhere in between. In one stead, what good will his earthly possessions do for him? Whose will they be then? Paul Tillich, a theologian from the last century, proposed the concept of ultimate concern. He said we can make worldly success our ultimate concern, but what do we do when aging, illness, failure, disability, or disillusionment catch up with us, leaving us no support or consolation? Or we can make God's desire for us and for our community, moment by moment, our ultimate concern. Making God our ultimate concern is our way of acknowledging that our well-being is closely tied to the well-being of others and the world in which we live. Then, when aging, illness, failure, disability, or disillusionment catch up with us, we have our community of family, friends, and neighbors to console us and to help us along. Tillich's concept of ultimate concern sounds a bit like Adam Grant's givers and takers. Grant describes how takers can initially get ahead, often by appearing to be matchers, but managing to turn interactions to their own benefit. Takers see the world as a win-lose proposition, and they intend to win and will do anything to make it happen. But it doesn't take long for others to recognize a taker. Like the rich fool in the parable, or Ken Lay from Enron, the fall can often lead to a hard landing. Givers, on the other hand, go out of their way to invest in others. They don't see the world as win-lose, but can imagine win-win. Grant says that when givers succeed, success spreads out to others who then are even more willing to support the giver. Givers create value, Grant says, while takers just claim it as their own. On his way to the cross in Jerusalem, Jesus realizes that his followers will need to invest in one another in order to be a community of caring as they face the hard things that lay ahead. I think that same could be said about us as followers of Jesus today. We face many hard things today, issues that require all of us to come together to begin working for the common good. For example, for too many years we've downplayed the significance of climate change. Scientists now warn that a climate crisis may be at hand as severe drought affects the western third of our nation, leading to explosive fires that threaten even the giant sequoias of Yosemite National Park. Floods wreak havoc in St. Louis and in the Appalachian hollers of eastern Kentucky. Severe weather events just seem to be getting bigger and more deadly. And if this doesn't have you worried, talk to a teenager. Talk to a teenager about how they feel about climate change. I'm a first-time grandpa as of May 3rd, and I can't help but imagine what the world will be like that we leave for our grandchildren and for their grandchildren. Will the changes that are necessary to make, while the changes that are necessary to make a difference in climate change, they will be expensive. Yes, they probably will. Is it the right thing to do for us anyway, we who have been charged by God to be stewards of the earth? Probably. This parable is Jesus' blunt attempt to startle his followers and us to pay attention, to look beyond our own needs, to care for the needs of the other, to work towards the common good. That's a pretty big goal, building a sense of common good, bigger than any of us can pull off by ourselves. But we can start with ourselves. For most of us, the qualities of Adam Grant's givers don't come to us naturally, but we can intentionally seek ways to develop those values until they become more of a natural part of who we are. We can invest our ultimate concern in God and in our neighbors so that we do treasure what really is valuable and find comfort and support on that day when some devastating event befalls us. Don't worry. Don't worry about things that have no ultimate worth. Invest yourself into a deeper relationship with God and with your neighbor, and you will have a treasure that is truly enduring.